to Reality Fighter TV. In this video tutorial, I want to talk about and demonstrate the proper execution of what I feel is the most effective way to throw the common and popular strike called an overhand right strike. Now, the overhand right strike is a very common and used technique in martial arts circuits, mixed martial arts particularly, and even boxing circuits. But the question is what is the most effective way to throw the technique from a biomechanics perspective and a tactical options perspective? If you look on all the other YouTube channels and type in the overhand right strike, you're going to see a list, an infinite amount of lists of how people demonstrate the overhand right technique. But what you fail to see is that all those videos never demonstrate the advantages and the disadvantages of the technique. So this is going to be the first video in YouTube that demonstrates what I feel are the important advantages of the technique and the most important disadvantages of the technique. Okay? So make sure that you watch the entire length of the video here so you get all the specific tips that if you are someone looking to improve this technique or you find it fun to deliver, this is going to be a video that you'll want to see that's going to help you not only just understand the mechanics of the technique more, but understanding the physics and the tactical actions behind the technique. All right. The other thing before we get going in this tutorial is I want to offer all subscribers or going to be potentially new subscribers in here and viewers a special offer at the end of this video here. All right. So make sure that you watch the entire length of the video because I'm going to mention a special offer at the end of this video. All right. And there's going to be a special reward for people who particularly comment on this video. So if you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe now. Turn on your notifications button by clicking on the little bell in the corner of your screen. Make sure you like the video, leave a comment on it, share it with your friends if you find this video informative to help me further grow my channel in here. So thank you, and let's go ahead and talk about the overhand right strike and the common advantages and disadvantages of the technique. Let's get to it. Okay, the first thing I want to share with you when it comes to delivering the overhand right strike technique are the advantages of the technique. Okay, and in my opinion, there are 5 advantages of the technique, and I'm going to start with the ones that are probably first and foremost the most important, but often overlooked, and then I'm going to kind of graduate down to the kind of the more common ones. And the first advantage of the technique is the technique can be delivered on a wide variety of angles, right? So the strike is has a lot of articulation when it comes to delivering on angles, right? Because the overhand right strike is considered a circular blow, right? So when most people think of an overhand right strike, right, it's kind of an arcing type blow. It's very similar to a pitcher throwing a baseball in here. So and there are a lot of variations as far as the angles that technique can come in, right? So whether it's an overhand left in here like this, right, overhand right, a lot of people have a lot of different ideas about it. But the number one factor that makes it a huge advantage strike in the arsenal over other strikes is I can deliver it on angles, right? I can deliver the technique, coming at this angle. If you think of like a clock, right, and I'm looking at you, and right, that's 12 o'clock, right? This is 1 o'clock, right, and this is 6 for me, right, and this would be like 10 over here like this. Technically, I'm throwing the technique starting over here like 1 or 2 o'clock, and it kind of finishes down over here like at 7 or 8 o'clock. So some people can throw the technique can be delivered like this, right? Some people can deliver the technique coming over the top, right? Some people kind of bring their arm out and kind of come this way in here, right? Sometimes the technique can be delivered like real long, like this, or it can be delivered real short, right? Some people have ideas about turning their fist over in a lot of different ways. But the major advantages of the ability to deliver on a lot of different angles, okay? So that's number 1, right? Number 2 advantage of it is because of it has a multi-directional usage, right? Because of the angles in here, right? So I can, deliver it I can throw it over the top, I could swat with it in here, I could come like this, right? I could come out here and then come this way. Because of that factor of angles, the second advantage of the technique is its deceptive factor, okay? And what does deception mean, right? It can be delivered because it can be delivered very tricky, right? So I could be standing here like this in here, and I can start the technique coming out like this, and you think it's going to arc this way, and at the last moment I change the angle on it, right? Or maybe I start coming over the top like this, right? And then I kind of come out, right? Or maybe I start coming out like I'm going to throw a hook in here, and then I arc it over like this. So it has a very kind of omnidirectional movement, if you would, in here. There's really no one fixated direction is coming. It's kind of like a pitcher throwing, a fastball in here, right? Every time the body arcs out like this, the wrist and the arm, depending upon the type of pitch that he's throwing in here, right? You don't see that happening because it's happening so fast. And when the ball releases, the snap of the wrist, the angle, right? The angle of the torso, very similar to the punch in here like this, can create a very deceptive look. And a lot of times, what knocks fighters out or people out is because they misjudge it. All they see is this, right? And they've got their arms already out here like this, trying to stop the thing, and the punch kind of comes over the top in here like this, or it comes, or this direction in here like this. So the second advantage is the deceptive factor. The third advantage of the technique is its natural movement. Okay, natural movement of the shoulder. Right, the shoulder is a ball and socket joint here like this. So the shoulders never move. Just back and forth, up and down, right, out to the side. They do kind of a combination of all those directions. Again, very similar, right, to throwing a baseball in here. Okay, so I would say it's one of the more natural techniques to throw because of the natural movement of the shoulder, right? If you think about when people swim, right, we don't dog paddle in here, right, and we don't just bring our arms out to the side and go like this, right? We're kind of somewhere, somewhere in between. So you don't see a pitcher just throw a ball to the side and he doesn't throw it over the top, right? There's some kind of somewhere in between where he's taking this rotational, this rotational vector here to the target. So natural mobility is the third advantage of the technique, right? The fourth technique, which is the fourth advantage of the technique that usually most people get hung up on only, is the power factor, right? The overhand right strike, if you deliver it with a lot of acceleration in here, right, and a lot of weight transfer in here, you can get a lot of power behind this strike, right? That's why it's very successful in sport combat with knockouts in here, is because it's kind of like having a rock on the end of the string. I get this, rock, rotating in here from the center of rotation, going faster and faster because I can get the string really long. So when people start the technique way back here, right, you'll see some fighters will come in, they got their arm way back here, right? And it's kind of like throwing a ball in here like this as they're starting to throw the ball from here, right? A lot of power kind of arcing from back here, okay? So that's the fourth advantage of the strike, or the technique. The fifth advantage of the technique is range, okay? Because the overhand right strike is a circular strike, it can be thrown in a wide variety of ranges, right? So people can throw from really far away. It can kind of lead with their head, not the best idea. They're out of position, but it can be delivered from way out here like this, okay, like a Hail Mary. It can be delivered in real close as well in here like this, right? I can boom, deliver it here, right? I can hit real close in here if I wanted to, or I can hit real far out in here. So range is the fifth advantage of the technique. So now let's go ahead and get into the disadvantages of the overhand right strike in here. Okay, so I just defined the 5 advantages of using the overhand right strike or technique in your fighting arsenal. Now what I want to go ahead and talk about is the 5 disadvantages of the technique. Okay, now the 5 disadvantages of the technique are often not emphasized or explained when using this technique, or how to do it or why to do it. Often what you see is a lot of people just say, well, here's how to do the technique, but there's no tactical reasons why, and they don't explain a lot of the disadvantages of the technique, and there are quite a few. So let's start with number 1. The first disadvantage of the technique is telegraphic factor, right? The overhand right strike is a very telegraphic technique. What's a telegraphic technique? It's a warning sign that your technique is coming. You've done some kind of preconceived movement, a movement in here that's letting the person know here this thing comes. And usually, telegraphing usually happen through some kind of a body movement alarm, right? So one of the things with the overhand right strike is it's very, very telegraphic as terms of watching as the arm comes out here, right? A lot of times people will throw the arm, right? It's just kind of natural. The arm has to come out, and people will lean over here and really arc their body in this technique. So when you see the body move, a lot before the technique is occurring, or even why the technique is occurring in here, right? It's inevitable that the technique is going to be very telegraphic. Okay, so often people will use the bobbin here, all right, for accuracy purpose, but people will throw the punch and you'll see the arm come way out in here, right? They'll do something like that, right? The body will really lean over here like this. They get their head out of the way. The punch drops from here, right? And they kind of land the technique like this. And not only do they telegraph the technique, but a lot of times what happens is that they're out of position while they're throwing the technique, and often after they've missed or landed the technique. Okay, so telegraphing is the first disadvantage of throwing the overhand right technique. Let's go on to the second one. The second disadvantage of throwing the overhand right strike is the commitment factor, right? Because the overhand right strike is considerably a very powerful strike, along with other techniques. The more power that you put into any technique, often, most of the times, it's a more committed action, right? So, here like this first here at the viewers in here, right? When you throw an overhand right, you'll see people, they lean in way like this, right? And all their weight, right, is going to transfer to that that left leg in here like this. Or if I'm throwing an overhand left in here, right, all the weight transfers to this right leg in here. Same thing, it's almost the same commitment again as that baseball pitcher, right? As they throw the ball in here, a lot of times they're on one leg when they land, right? Nobody really throws an overhand strike and just kind of is in perfect balance like that. So it's a very committed technique. So that's one of the disadvantages, right, as a technique. So what happens if I miss, right, or the person counters me in here? This is what a lot of viewers and trainers don't understand, is if I miss or I overcommit in here, I'm completely out of position, right? I'm right in here in order to recover, right? So I throw the punch and whoom, he ducks, or I miss in here. I'm in no position to counter back or escape and extract my body, right, out of that action, as quickly as I could, right? Because I've put all my emphasis into throwing all my weight, and I'm confident, or I'm going to land this blow in here like this. But most people don't take into account, if they miss, right, some of the ramifications that can happen. And if you overcommit, you are likely to be out of position to get countered relatively easily. So that is the second disadvantage. Okay, the third disadvantage of throwing the overhand right strike is accuracy, the accuracy factor, right? So what does that mean? The accuracy factor is basically, you either land the punch or you miss the punch. There's not a lot of margin for error for this technique, right? Because I mentioned earlier, it's a very committed strike, and it's often thrown with a full amount of power in here like this. Is that most fighters either don't aim the punch when they throw it because they're so focused on trying to knock the guy out, right? And the other factor that kind of with the accuracy issue is because the body is changing levels at the same time, right? So when people throw the technique, because they're trying to lean over and duck their head out of the way, right? The arm is coming up here in one direction, and their body's coming and going down in this direction. And often, a lot of times, they're looking at the ground. You see a lot of fighters will close their eyes, and they may make contact, with a part of their fist, or they may not. So it's kind of like throwing some of these punches, throwing a punch or throwing a football and kind of Hail Mary. Like sometimes it's like the thought process is just hoping for the best, right? So because I can't really, well, I can, but again, this is what most of the industry does, is that they don't actually try to focus, right, the technique, right on the money. They don't try to hit, flat and really, kind of, aim the punch in there, right? Now that's the art to delivering this technique, right? So again, kind of like, circular punches, one of the advantages of circular punches is that you can hit, right, in very different, close distances in here, right, out here like this, right, as well as angles in here. So it's kind of like a fishing rod. Like you use too much line sometimes when they're in close range and they overshoot the punch, or they don't use enough of the fishing line in here and they stand too far away, right, and they miss in here like this, right? So training the accuracy for the technique is super important, and it's one of the disadvantages that most people don't realize is when they encounter this strike. So if you are going to throw an overhand right strike in here, right, or an overhand left in here like this, you really want to work on the accuracy of the technique. So that'll ensure that you have a more successful landing rate, and also it will also help drastically reduce injury to your hand. So third disadvantage is the accuracy. Let's go on to the next disadvantage. Okay, the fourth disadvantage of delivering the strike is injury prevention. Okay, a lot of fighters often can break their hands, break their wrists, hurt their shoulders because they don't aim the technique right. So this kind of goes back to having accuracy or not. Right? The more accurate you are with the technique, the more you focus the force and hit with the right part of your hands in here, so your skeletal muscular structure, more of your body kind of absorbs the energy, right? The less injury for your hand. Now this is something I see very common in a lot of YouTube videos about how to hit and how to position your hand. I find a lot of them kind of just very odd. But I want to kind of address this from a biomechanics, a physics standpoint here, right? Now, if you have boxing gloves on, you may not have to do this as much in here. And a lot of people, when they throw overhand, they'll hit with boxing gloves. And again, that is not realistic at all. That is not reality, because you have a big pillow on your hand. And if you have hand wraps underneath that as well, you got a big cast around on your hand, and you got a big pillow on top of it. So you kind of can hit not as efficient, right? And hit with a kind of a bent wrist or something, or skim with your knuckles and not really feel the problems. But when it comes to applying it in reality, whether it's in the street, especially with a bare fist, or in MMA, you have to be dead on accurate in here, and you have to put your skeletal muscular structure in the right line of force, as well as aim the end of the weapon so it hits in the right spot. Because remember, you're hitting somebody's cranium and you have no idea where their head's going to be. Okay? So, what happens if I'm throwing an overhand here and I think I'm going to hit him right in the jaw, like this. Okay? And he ducks his head at the last moment. I end up hitting him here, right? Right? Well, guess what? His skull's not going to give, right? But my hand's going to give, right? So, what I see a lot is a lot of people will teach the overhand. I'll see things like this where they turn the palm over like this, and what they're trying to do is throw the technique and kind of hit, right? The camera can pick this up. They're trying to hit, with the two knuckles. I've seen silly things like that in here, bang in here like this, right? Well, again, most people can't aim that, when it's going 100 miles an hour, right? And if you do hit with the end of your fist, the two knuckles or something, you're very likely to break your hand because, again, hitting with the two knuckles in here, your wrist is not going to be in a straight line, right, in here, right? Your wrist is not centered behind the knuckles in here a lot of times like this, right? So my recommendation is, you want to hit as flat as possible in here. And what is as flat as possible? You want to try to stamp your entire hand, right, on the target in here like this, okay? And, if you're aiming at the chin, the jaw in here like this, you want to make sure, right, that you hit as flat as possible in here like this. And depending upon your wrist articulation or your shoulder in here, you may have to make some modifications, right? But I see people, they'll turn and they'll hit with their thumb joint in here like this. I've seen stuff like this, right? Okay, in here, which is just a really poor position for your wrist and your shoulder in here, and even your elbow. I've seen people squat in here like this. I've seen people do things where they try to, turn the fist over completely vertical in here like this, right? And so a lot of times the technique doesn't get that far in here, and that's what happens this is how they injure their hands. is because they throw the punch and the guy, you know, ducks down in here like this, or I misjudge in here and I end up hitting like this. Sometimes people hit with a stiff arm like this in here and something happens like that, or the guy ducks, turns his head, and the guy ends up hitting here in the temple area, right? In here, bang, in here, they break their hands, okay? So there's a lot of mechanics behind the actual delivery of the technique that makes this technique one of the more trickier techniques than all the other punches in the punching arsenal. So the injury factor is the fourth disadvantage of the technique. Let's go on to the next one. Okay, the fifth and final disadvantage of delivering the overhand right strike technique is the over-reliance of using the technique. Overusing the technique and relying on it solely as your kind of go-to knockout shot, okay? In my opinion, what I see a lot of fighters do in sport bouts and stuff is when they do get a knockout punch, most of the time it's going to be some variation of an overhand strike or some kind of artless haymaker that looks like that's delivered in an overhand fashion here, right? And in my opinion, when I see fighters train, when they hit the mitts and stuff like that, right? You know, a lot of fighters, will throw a precision, rear cross in here, right, or a rear cross like this, right here. They got a hook, right, cross, jab, uppercut, hook in here, and then they may practice an overhand right sometimes. But in the fight, often, a lot of times, when fighters have like a deal breaker in here, and they have they're put under duress, a lot of them will kind of forego the tactical options and not see the quicker way to solve a problem, and so they'll rely on an overhand strike, and either it's kind of again like throwing a Hail Mary. They're going to land it or they're going to not, right? And in my opinion, I think a lot of that has to do with just the fear factor, what's going through their head psychologically in the moment, right? Some fighters may feel that they don't have the power, right, nor the confidence to throw a right cross in here like this, right? Like the guy's right in front of them, and they're like, well, should I throw a punch or not? And so what they do is they go, well, you know what? If I throw a right cross in here, there's a chance if he throws a punch too, I could get knocked out. My head's up in the upper gate in here like this, so we could hit each other simultaneously like that. Or I just don't feel I have the endurance. Therefore, I can't get the power generated to throw a knockout punch with my right cross. So what I'll do is, if I'm going to take any action and advance from my stance in here and into a technique, I'll throw an overhand strike and just hope for the best. So that could be some of the reasons why psychologically they over-rely on it in here, because of just because of what's going through their mind at the time. Usually it's duress and fear. The other reason why they could be over-relying on it a lot is because they spend so much time using that technique that they actually don't practice the mechanics and how to get the power and the mechanical structure from other techniques. In other words, how do you generate that kind of power from just in very close range in here like this, right? If you're doing it from here, right? How do you deliver that kind of power in an uppercut from close ranges? Or how do you deliver it, in a hook from very close ranges, right? So it could be a mechanical misunderstanding, right? Or a combination of all those. So now that I've mentioned the advantages and the disadvantages of throwing the overhand right strike, what I want to do now is I want to share with you and demonstrate and how I deliver this strike, and kind of share with you the biomechanics that I follow, and to ensure that I don't hurt myself, and also that I maximize effectiveness, as well as the tactical reasons on when to use that strike. Okay, so I want to share with you the ways that I go about delivering the overhand right strike. And again, this is just my preference, but hopefully this information will help you so you can perfect your overhand strike. Now, I'm naturally a southpaw, so I'm going to demonstrate this from my left arm in here, because I stand this way in here like this, but ultimately it doesn't matter if you're right-handed or left-handed. Now, one of the first things that I do differently than I think than most is I deliver the strike both from the rear side of my body and the lead side of my body. Okay, so what does that mean? So naturally, if I'm a southpaw in here, is that most people, when they throw the technique, they're going to throw it from the rear side of their body. Rear side of the body meaning the side of the body that's further away from the target in here, like this. Okay, so if you're a southpaw in here, right, you're delivering it coming up and like this, right? But also, you should be able to throw that from the lead side of your body, lead side being the closest side of the target. So if you can deliver the technique from this direction here, from back here, coming from further away in here, there should be no reason why you can't deliver it, right, delivering it from here, right? The only difference is that you have less torque, right, into the target in here like this, as opposed to here, I can bring my rear side of my body, right, all the way around in here like this. But technically, really, there is no real difference in the mechanics of the strike, okay? Whether it's delivering it from here, right, or delivering it from here. So looking at the camera in here, I can throw the technique coming from back here, or if I switch my feet around in here, now this shoulder, this hip is closer to the target, right, I can throw the technique like that. So that's one of the first things that I do differently, is I practice the strike from both sides of my body, as well as all strikes from both sides of my body, okay? So overhand strikes, right, if you have a rear hook from your left side, you should be able to do it from your left side and your lead side. So rear hook, okay, lead hook, right, rear overhand, lead overhand, so on and so forth, okay? The next thing that I do, that I ensure that I make sure that I do right, is the range factor. This technique, in my opinion, should be thrown at a range to where you can reach the intended target without overcommitting. Okay, so what does that look like? Okay, so depending upon the, in the moment here, what's happening in this fighting situation here, right? When I practice the technique, I want to make sure that if I'm throwing it from the rear side of my body in here, that I actually can, reach the target, no problem in here, and stay in balance. So I can, most importantly, channel in to other techniques, okay? So not only am I want to land a successful overhand strike in here, I want to make sure that I'm not out of position in case I miss, right, the accuracy and commitment factor, in case I miss, right, then I'm not, falling off balance in here like this, okay? This is why a lot of fighters get taken down, is because they overshoot the punch, because they overcommit and the guy ducks. Remember, there's no space right here. There's no barrier right here for you to stop, right, a takedown in here, let alone sprawl. So when I practice the technique, I make sure that when I throw it, I'm at an effective range. So A, I don't miss, okay, or minimize my chances of missing. B, I'm not out of position, okay. And 3, that I minimize the telegraphing, okay? So the more that you stand out far away and try to heave this thing from back here, like this, you're telegraphing more, and the chances of you missing are greater in here, and the chances of you getting countered, right, are greater in here like this, okay? So when I deliver the technique, the range is a very important factor, right? Especially from the rear side of my body. Now, if it's from the lead side of my body, okay, it's still, the range is an important factor, but not as important because I am closer, okay? So if I'm delivering it from my lead side of my body in here, right, I don't have to lean in as much, right? So the power is coming from the overhand, it's coming from the inclination factor, right? It's one of the forms of weight transfer. I can arc my body in the technique, and depending upon how I arc the arm out, if I throw it more of like a hooking type action like this, or I throw it more over the top in here, there's some rotation in conjunction with inclination, okay? So, again, when I do it in here, I want to make sure, that I can reach him relatively easy with any one of my other techniques, okay? If I can reach him with this technique pretty easily, okay, the overhand in here, I can reach him, right, with other techniques is here, pretty easily, okay? So those are some of the first things I do first differently when it comes to delivering the overhand right strike. Okay, so I just mentioned some of the things that I do differently when it comes to throwing the overhand strike, right? I make sure that I'm in the right range when I deliver the technique, so I'm basically not out of position in here, okay? And the other thing that I mentioned is I throw that technique, I practice the technique from both rear, right, and lead sides of the body, right? So rear, right, if you're overhand right here, right, and the lead one coming here, as opposed to the same thing if the southpaw position like that, okay? The next thing that I do differently that I really focus in is getting my skeletal muscular structure in the proper line of force, so that when I deliver the technique, I minimize, and protect the damage and ensure the protection of my hand. Okay. So what does that mean? Okay. Well, there's kind of, like I said earlier, this technique can be delivered in a multi-plane or an omnidirectional strike, right? So it can be delivered more like a hooking type action where it arcs from one side of the body and then finishes through the other side of the body, or it can be delivered more like a rear cross punch where I create an arc coming over the top in here like this, but actually the skeletal muscular structure is in the line of force irregardless of where I make contact with the target. Okay? All right? So, when people throw the technique and they turn their wrist over and they got their arm going out here like this, right? In here, their strike, if you look at this, their strike may not be in a very good line of force when it makes contact. Why? It's because they think they're relying on, they think they're going to make contact out here and out here only. Okay, when in reality, the guy can move in very close in here, and this arcing type punch, right, ends up hitting with a swatting type action like this, right? So it ends up glancing clunk in here like this, and now the force, the actual counter force that's transitioned back into my body for every action, there's an equal opposite reaction. When it transitions my body, it leaks out one of my joints, because my bone structure was not behind each joint, right, to stabilize that energy. Okay, this is where often people either break their hands or they have a shoulder problem because they're thinking they're going to hit out here, right, and then that happens is that they hit in a kind of a bad line, right, because the guy moved in or something like this, and now the force goes clank, right, in here like this, and then what happens are their elbows out of alignment or their wrists out of alignment, and all that force gets pushed back into the body, and the energy is going to leak out the weak structure, right? Particularly in the shoulders or the wrist, because they just don't have the strength to support that kind of energy, okay? So I make sure when I throw the technique that one of the principles that I follow is I follow the rear cross principle in here like this. If you can throw a left rear cross right here, right? Technically, for me, an overhand strike is just a same technique, just changing levels. I'm merely dropping my head into a slight ducking position, and I'm just creating a little bit of an arc coming over the top. Okay? So at slow motion, it kind of looks boom like this, right? What I'm not trying to do is I'm not trying to throw my body way off to the side and get my arm out here, because look where I'm hitting. My forearm, right, is not stabilized in here, right? The shoulder and the elbow is not behind the wrist, so clunk, and then this happens in here, okay? So one of the things that I learned and I teach is if you can throw a rear cross punch like this, okay, is all you're really doing is just dropping down into a duck position and just practicing the technique, right from here, right? Like this, okay? And by ducking down, are you changing levels and protecting your head? At the same time, as you bring your forearm up like this, you're also protecting the side of your face in here. And I don't need the distance like people need out here anymore to hit with a lot of force, because my bone structure is going to be traveling in the line of force, the proper line of force for maximal leverage, right, from the point of conception, right, to its destination. So I could technically be right here, right, and throw the technique from here, right, in here like this. Just with a slight little kind of up and over movement, right, whomp, like this, right? It doesn't have to necessarily arc down. It may travel down that line, right, if the target, is there in here like that. But you're going to have to aim that strike in here. So following the proper line of force and getting your skeletal structure lined up immediately. So if you hit right here, the punch is strong. If you hit here, the punch is strong, right? Or if you hit out here, the punch is strong, okay? Now, if you throw it more of an arcing type, like a hooking action, the same thing would apply. You want the wrist centered behind the knuckles, and the elbow and forearm centered behind the wrist, and the bicep and the shoulder centered behind this. The more you start trying to articulate the wrist and turn it like this, in here and create these awkward movements in here like this, okay, the more you're putting the shoulder girdle, okay, in a bad position to resist force, okay? So if you throw it more of a kind of an overhand, kind of a hooking type action, then you want to have your wrist in its natural curling position. So if you throw a rear hook, all we're doing is just arcing this a little bit, coming over here like that, okay? But I try to hit more straight like this because I want to go over the person's guard, boom, like in here. But if you choose to want to bring your arm out, remember the telegraphing factor, and you have to get this curling action right in the right spot at the right time, okay, if you're going to do that, all right? That's a big demand on a person's timing, okay? And it's very risky to do, okay? So to be more economical and to be protected with the strike and you protect your face, I recommend is to try to keep your head in this pocket and throw the punch like you're looking up right over the top of it and just enough to skim the guard, right? So if his guard is right here, there's no reason to come way out here and go, here it comes. It's a very telegraphic action anyway. Is to create just a little bit of an arc to come right over the top, whomp, in here like this, and make contact along that line, okay? All right, so let's go into some other factors and what I do differently to make the overhand strike more efficient. Okay, so I just went over some more of the tactics that I use to make the overhand strike more efficient for me. And the last one here I just discussed was the skeletal muscular structure factor, putting your skeletal muscular structure right in the proper line of force, right? And the line of force is basically the most functional trajectory for the target, you know, for the technique to take in here, right? So you want something that's going to be the most functional trajectory, that's going to take the most efficient route possible. It's going to minimize damage. It's going to maximize effect. It's going to be, you know, minimal amount of effort in here. More importantly, protect, you know, put that arm in a strong and safe position here on impact, right? Because a lot of people don't take into account that, you know, there's a lot of damage that can actually happen, you know, in your hands and shoulders from this technique. All right, the last thing I want to share with you on some of the tactics that I use to make this strike efficiently is the economy of motion factor, okay? So what does the economy of motion factor mean? Economy of motion means is stripping away all unnecessary actions or movements that really don't have anything to do with the outcome of the technique, okay? In other words, you want to try to get rid of any wasted motion that really you know, doesn't help you with the technique. If it causes you more strain, if it causes you more telegraphing, more effort in here, right, then it's probably motion that you can strip away of. But you're going to have to practice and kind of really see, you know, what you can get away with that still maximizes the effect, right? You don't want to economize your motion so much that you don't have any power, right? So economize your motion from the overhand strike would be, and you got to take into account. Remember, when you're applying this in a real fight, whether it's a sport, you know, or street, is that everything that you do, right, under duress, you're going to exaggerate a lot more, right, because of the fear factor, right? So everybody telegraphs to some degree, but the real trick, the real art form is to really learn how to strip away any unnecessary action as much as possible and still maintain the effect that you want, okay? Now, I mentioned earlier, this strike is very telegraphic in nature, so when people are teaching or training it, they're training to bring their arm up here and do something like this, right? Look at the space that's open right here. All right, the moment I go like this, a good fighter who's paying attention, if I go step off line like this, you know, where they teach you to do something like this, look at the space in here, right? So if my arm is going to here in practice, in the real fight, it's going to come way down here like a bowling swing in here, right? Everybody always exaggerates their actions under duress, and your actions are exaggerated even more in power strikes, okay? So when I practice economizing my motion for the strike and still maintaining the effect that I want, I got to put my body in the right position. Okay, I have to put it in a position where it's stabilized before I deliver the technique, and then why I'm delivering the technique like this. Okay, all right. So anytime you want to deliver a force, you have to be able to brace against that type of force. All right. So when I first started learning the technique, and then I started refining it for myself and teaching it, I always started teaching people the rear cross first like this, okay? And then what I started teaching them to do was just to kind of create a little bit of an arc, right? So bring the arm up a little bit, a little higher than, let's say that their shoulder line. So if your rear cross is right here, boom, like this, I practice bringing it up a little more, right? And a little more in here, making sure that I still hit flat in here like this, okay? This is why I like to hit more like this than hit like this, because a lot of people can't articulate their shoulder or wrist correctly in here to really hit with a punch that's going to protect that shoulder and protect that wrist in here, right? So what I recommend is just trying to practice from here first without having to step and commit. Forget about the power. You know you're going to get a lot of power, right? Work on the economy of motion and the accuracy. So as I started to arc the punch up more like this, I started dropping my head a little more, boom, like this, and I'm looking at the target as I'm hitting it in here, bang. So, at the camera, pop, like this, right? Start here, like this, and then I start kind of bringing it up, right? Bringing it up. And depending upon your shoulder flexibility, you may be able to go really high, right? But again, how far do you really need to go? Right? You're really just trying to go around the person's guard a little bit. So if his guard is like right here, there's no reason to bring the punch way up here, right? It's just wasted motion. Remember, economize your motion, right? So another factor is you want to make sure that as you bring the punch up and kind of a little bit of an arc and kind of coming downward, doesn't have to hit downward like this, right? If he's taller than you, that's not going to happen, right? But this isn't good enough, is to make sure that you're not pulling it back, right? So economize your motion, making sure that you don't go way back here. So I may throw a good punch, right, in here, but I pull the thing back. And that's one of the problems when people teach, to step over here. Yeah, you got to do that a little bit, but they're like this. So there's a huge space to get countered, and a good fighter who's paying attention is going to take advantage of that opening, right? Okay, right? So I economize my motion, bang, in here, like that. Right? Now when I land in here, I want to make sure that I recover pretty quickly. I don't want to let this punch just go like this and just fall down my wayside. Another thing that I think a lot of people do differently than me is that I actually make sure that I bring my hand right back in here like this. Or more importantly, I make sure my body's in the right position, because if I make contact or not, right, I'm in position, right, to do something else. Right? So my recommendation is, if you are use the overhand right strike, and you are going to throw it as an initiator in here, make sure that you're in a balanced position. If you miss it, you can chain right into other techniques as well. Okay? So make sure you get your range in the right spot so you're not out of position. Making sure that you're in a good line of force in here like this, and just minimize the ducking in here, and really just try to create a very small arcing action, but very explosive in here. And then bring your hand right in position, right back in position, so you can grapple or fight in close range from there. Okay? So those are some of the things that I do tactically to make that punch more efficiently. Okay? There are some other things I can share with you as well that have to do with setting up the technique in here, but I'm going to leave that for another video tutorial. Okay? So if you found that information informative, again, please hit the like button, comment it in here. I want to go ahead now and share the offer for helping me grow my channel. So here it is. Okay, so I said in the beginning of this video tutorial that I was going to share an offer, or offer my viewers and subscribers an offer for helping me grow my channel. And this is for current subscribers or potentially new subscribers. So here's the offer, right? So growing my YouTube channel is something that I'm doing on the side, in addition to my coaching and teaching I do. I do personal training. I've been doing it for 25 years. A lot of the martial arts, also in strength training, performance training, as well as physical therapy, and then some wellness programs as well. So I only have about 420 something subscribers right now. So I'm trying to get my channel to 1,000 likes, and I have a lot of video content out there already, all in martial arts basically, because that is my passion. So my offer is this: the first 10 people who comment on this video, okay, the first 10 people, so I'm going to check to see who are the first 10 people in the next 24 hours. The first 10 people that comment, on this channel. You can say whatever you want in here, right? Obviously, hopefully something nice. I am going to offer you, in return for that, I'm going to offer the first 10 people 1 month of free training with me in anything you want, okay? So the way this works is like this. If you live locally in my hometown, okay, and I live in Arizona in here, if you live locally and you're someone that follows my channel in here, right, you know, then you actually have a very easy way to meet with me in here. If you do follow me and you're not locally, I can always help you online with training, or if you can get yourself out here, I'd be more than happy to, you know, accommodate you and train you for a month. But either way, whether you live out of state or you're in state in here, I'm offering you free 1 month of free training in anything you want in here for commenting on this video and helping me get to 1,000 subscribers in here. Now, if the first 10 people who comment and I see that, I'm going to message each one of you, and I will send you a link of contact info where you can directly reach me in here, where I actually can talk to you on the phone. That way, I know exactly kind of who you are in here. So that is my offer. The first 10 people who comment on this video in the next 24 hours, I will document that and give everybody 1 month of free training in any area of martial arts or fitness or strength training and whatever you want, whether it's online or whether it's in person. Okay? So again, I hope you found this information informative. Again, if you are watching this, please leave a comment, subscribe, share it with your friends. You know, hit the like button. Don't forget to turn on your notifications, and please help me grow my channel in here to where so I can actually see and experience this channel getting to the success rate that I would like it to do. So again, thank you for watching this video, and stay tuned for the next video that'll be coming out real soon here. I've been putting a lot of them out relatively faster in here. So again, another one should be coming out in a week or so. Again, thank you for your support and take care. We'll see you soon.